worked so hard to put this conference on. It's been really exciting, and I'm so honored to be here to talk to you today about design for play. So I come from IDEO, but before IDEO, I worked in the toy industry. And one of the reasons I really liked working in toys is because it gave me the opportunity to bring more play into the world. And what could be more fun than that? But at one point, I realized I wanted to diversify a little bit and take part in designing for industries beyond toys and games. And that's when I joined IDEO. Now, at IDEO, I had that chance to really diversify and participate in projects that went across food and beverage, consumer products, health, education, and that was all really rewarding. But over and over again, I found myself pulled back to toys. And lucky for me, I was in IDEO Palo Alto, which is the one IDEO location that has a toy lab. So this is the lesser known part of IDEO, and whenever someone takes a tour of IDEO, they're always surprised to learn that we have a toy invention group. And we're a group that invents toys that we license to toy companies, as well as designing our own digital games and apps. And we do it, again, because we love bringing play out there. So over the years at IDEO, I've been there for over 10 years now, but I would go back and forth between the consulting side and then doing toys and games in between projects. And as I was doing this more and more, I found that you didn't really have to just design toys and games to bring play into the world, that actually play could cut across multiple industries. And that's because we know that play is about engagement. And play is about engagement in terms of physical engagement, cognitive engagement, as well as, and most importantly, emotional engagement. It pulls you in, and it gives you an experience that you won't forget and keeps you coming back for more. And play has the ability to enhance creativity, encourage exploration, build confidence, encourage risk-taking, make you participate in more social activities, and build empathy. And these, I think we can all agree, are really great benefits for children. But aren't they also really great benefits for adults? And aren't there areas within all these industries where play can play a really great role? So we started looking at, what is it about play that brings engagement? And we kind of found these different principles of play. And you can kind of see it in how you play with blocks. So with play, there's a really strong prompt. These blocks are colorful and they're fun to hold and they make great sounds. There's empowerment. They don't really do anything until you start building with them, until you pick them up and you start moving them into place. There's also progress and reward. So there's a sense of satisfaction as these blocks get higher and higher. And even for this 1-year-old, who happens to be my son, he felt great satisfaction when we got those 3 blocks up into one tower. Another aspect is surprise. So I think anyone who's watched kids play with blocks, and we probably all remember playing with blocks as well, part of the best part of playing with blocks is when they fall over unexpectedly, and that's when you get some of the biggest laughs. There's also surprise in terms of variability, in terms of how he might be building this 3-block tower today, but a year from now, he might be building a building, and further down the road, an entire city full of blocks. So it's that variability that keeps him coming back for more. And these 4 elements are ones that can be used. They don't always have to exist completely in every single product and experience you create, but scattering them throughout will make a product or experience more engaging. Now, I mentioned that I've been doing toys, and we've also been engaged in the consulting side of IDEO that touches all these different other industries. I want to give you some examples today of how these 4 elements cross toys and other industries as well. So let's start with prompt. And when I think about prompt, I really think about this as an invitation. And it's an invitation to engage, an invitation that draws you in. And this can be something that just strikes your curiosity, that really sparks your imagination. Or it can be a challenge, like a video game, where you want to get to the other side and you want to get there as fast as you can. Another way that toys can prompt is that they can give you a narrative. So they can introduce a story, and they can introduce characters that you engage with and you bond with. And one example are Disney Clip Clops. This was a toy we invented where there are these little plastic horses, and there's no batteries in them. This is fully mechanical, and they go down these series of ramps. This one was made in the form of a Disney castle, and it has princesses on horses. And every little kid knows immediately how to engage with a castle and princesses, and they want to be part of that story. For adults even, just that physical, mechanical piece is enough that when people come on tours, they can't help but put the horse at the top and watch it go down the ramp. It's just so much fun and really, really rewarding. So that's a really great invitation with toys. So how about beyond toys? I'm glad we all had the pleasure to hear Nandini speak yesterday. This is one of my favorite IDEO stories to tell, and it is the partnership that we did with MassMutual to create the Society of Grown-Ups. And what I really love about this story is that Society of Grown-Ups has a really strong prompt. So whereas you might go past a lot of financial institutions, and you might actually even be somewhat fearful, as Nandini described, you don't want to go in. But with Society of Grown-Ups, even when you hear the name Society of Grown-Ups, there's something really intriguing about that. And you want to know, what's that about? What is Society of Grown-Ups? If you walk by this storefront, you kind of want to peek in. Like even in this picture, you kind of want to get up close and see what's in that window. But beyond that, you can't just have the storefront. You have to have some substance behind that too. And Society of Grown-Ups does a great job of that. Again, with the library where you can go in and you can explore different topics on your own, as well as supper clubs and wine tasting that really celebrate finance and what it can do for you and how it can add to your happiness and help you meet your goals, as well as some of those other great parts of being a grown-up, like drinking wine and having supper with a bunch of friends. Next, let's look at empowerment. So play itself is a verb. It's an action, something that you want to do. And so toys give kids an active role to play. And more so than that, it often gives kids a role that they can't play on a normal basis because those roles are reserved for adults. So there's a touch of magic when a kid can do something beyond what they normally think they can do. And this is a toy we created called Dusty Wing Control. And in this, we had a really interesting insight that when kids play with remote controls, it's really hard because there's a little tiny joystick and kids don't necessarily have the best dexterity. So expecting them to be able to manipulate a plane by moving a remote control is not something that's necessarily reasonable. But if you take these wind tips and you put them on your hands, well, kids are already pretending to be planes by going like this. So now when they do it, they actually can steer the plane and make the plane go. And as you can tell from this picture, this little guy really loves that. So it's rewarding. It makes them do something beyond what they expected they can do. In education, we've done something similar. So this was a project we did with the San Francisco Unified School District. And they came to us because even though there's a number of kids who are qualified to receive reduced or free lunches, only 57% of those kids were actually partaking in the program. And if you looked at all kids and the kids who didn't qualify, only 13% of them actually participated in the program. What we can't allow happen is those kids were either going elsewhere and maybe eating chips or something less nutritious for lunch, or they weren't eating at all. And when it comes to learning, you need your energy to be able to learn and really partake and get the most out of school. So this was a big problem. And the first thing we did was we talked to the kids. So we brought the kids in, and a lot of the kids were really excited because they'd never been asked their opinion, which if you think about it, kids these days have a real voice. They're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're making YouTube videos for each other. They have a voice everywhere else. But in school, the adults are there telling them what they need to do, what they need to wear, how they act, and what they should learn, and what they should eat. So given the situation, of course, these kids felt disempowered. And when we talked to them, they were really excited. They had all these ideas for how they wanted to design the lunchroom. They had ideas for different ways they wanted to eat. And so some of the ideas that came out of it were that kids would have a choice. They could choose to eat family style, where they would have food at shared tables, and they could serve each other. They could also decide, hey, it's a nice day, I want to eat outside, let me grab a bag lunch and go outside. And there was a digital component that let kids order their food ahead of time, as well as rate their food after they'd eaten it. And the feedback from their ratings would go into deciding what would be on the menus going forward. And this empowerment was something that kids really got excited about. And the administrators got really excited about too, because they didn't realize that the kids had this much say and would want to influence the food system that much. So this is something that SFUSD is starting to roll out, and we're looking forward to seeing how successful it will be. Moving on, progress and reward is really about feedback and satisfaction. So when you think about this, a lot of times your mind might go straight to gamification, but feedback and reward, it doesn't necessarily have to be about points and badges and awards. It can be about that satisfaction you get when you're doing a craft project and you see your design come to life. So this is another project we did. This was the Barbie dress design studio. And in this project, girls could create dresses, or boys, not exclusive, but kids in general could create dresses for their dolls. And in this, it had the fabric stretched, and they could doodle on the fabric, they could put stencils, they could put gems, and then they just punch the fabric out and put it right on Barbie. There's no sewing required. So it took some of those hard parts out that weren't necessarily age appropriate for the age that was playing with this, and it let them create their own dresses. So kids could see their designs take shape. They could take the ideas that were in their heads and they could see them become dresses. They could see them being worn by Barbie, and then they could see their dresses being incorporated into their different play patterns. And then when they shared with family and friends, they'd get great feedback about what a great dress they designed. And in some ways, this would cause a leveling up effect. So similar to video games, where when you do well, you want to keep going so you improve. Same thing happens when you get amazing feedback. You want to keep engaging, and you want to keep doing better. So another project we did, this one is in the energy space, was with the US Green Building Council, and this was to redesign their LEED plaque. So the former LEED plaque was a static plaque that you'd put up on the wall, and it basically was awarded upon completion of a building, and it was based on the design of the building and how the architect had designed it. The major complaint was that this was based on the design of the building and not the actual performance of the building when people were living in it. So this dynamic plaque changed that. And what it does is that it's a plaque that you can put in hopefully a central location where all the building inhabitants can check it out. And as you're looking at it, you can see how the building is performing in terms of waste and water, energy consumption, comfort. And you can see this racetrack design. It was very purposeful that it was this racetrack design. And this was in 2012. There's some other products that have come out since that have a similar design. But in 2012, this was something that we looked at as a really great way to show progress and get people to want to keep doing better. Because it's a racetrack and it has arrows. It's always going in the positive direction. You always feel like you're making progress. You don't start from zero where you have no momentum. You start from a point where you're already starting to go, and you just have to push it a little bit further. It also has to do with how games a lot of times don't take you from poor to good to great. You start at good and you go to great. And that feels so much better. You're never going to be on the poor side. You'll always be at least good. Which brings us to surprise. And surprise is really about keeping it fresh. So how do you make something always feel new and always have that little bit of something that you don't expect, so it delights you in that certain way? This is an app we did with our friends at Sesame Workshop. It's called Elmo Calls, and true to its name, it's Elmo calling you. And again, as I mentioned, toys really are great at letting kids do things that they can't normally do. So even young children, like 1-year-olds, 6-month-olds, will go around and they'll hold things to their ears and just start blabbering. They might not know how to talk, but they'll hold something to their ear and just go, blah, 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 blah. They know the concept of a telephone. But anyone who has kids knows that giving your child your phone is dangerous. My child has prank called my boss several times, and luckily he's a fan of that. We work in toys after all. But it happens, so a lot of times the kids don't get the chance to do that. So with this app, they can actually get on the phone and they'll talk to Elmo. Now, one thing that's really interesting is that when we did the user research, and a number of great speakers before me have already talked about empathy and doing user research, so I'm not going to talk about that in depth. But one thing we did find was that when kids talk on the phone these days, it's usually a voice call. So what you see here is what they usually experience. It's usually Skype or FaceTime when they're talking to their grandparents. And when the child saw themselves in that image, they felt like they were talking to Elmo. And that's all that was needed, was that window in the lower left corner. So instead of spending a lot of time researching voice recognition and artificial intelligence and trying to get Elmo to respond correctly when the child said something, we just put a window there. And then we spent all the time that we would have spent on that technology instead on creating more content. And the creating the more content was the key, because if you have more content, you have more opportunities to surprise, because now we're cycling through a number of different calls, and a child will never know what they'll get each time. So, Elmo might call, and he might be saying, hey, let's play, let me tell you a story. There might be a song he sings. There might be a joke he wants to tell. Or if a parent gets into the app, Elmo might call and ask you to go use the potty. or to go to bed or take a bath. That's one of the things that the parents really love, is it's also a tool so the parents can go in there and have Elmo call you with a very specific message. It's really cool. We love having Elmo call. And I think he's actually calling right now.
Hi!
Hey, Elmo.
Elmo heard today is a big day. You're going someplace special. Elmo knows you'll see lots of new things, and you'll do new things too. Elmo loves it when Elmo's mommy takes Elmo someplace special, like the park or the zoo. Elmo knows you'll love your special place too. Okay, Elmo should say goodbye now. You have a very busy day. Have fun. Elmo loves you.
We love you too, Elmo. Thank you. So I know Elmo knew, but he knew we had a busy day today and it would be a delight. And so it's nice that you called to wish us well. So it's fun to just get those calls. I mean, even adults, we love hearing from Elmo. And our friends at Sesame Workshop, they are just fantastic. They're on top of surprise and delight as well. One of our favorite meetings with Sesame is we were doing a new app with them. And they had just done a recording session with Elmo. So the Elmo talent had come in and read through the script. And they sent me a file, and they said, hey, we're all on Skype. And he's like, hey, we would like you to really check out this, the audio sample we just sent you. We want to make sure the levels are right. If you could just check it out, that'd be fantastic. So we're like, yeah, sure, we'll check it right after the call. Like, no, we'd like you to check it right now when we're on the phone with you, because we just want to make sure, because we can go change it right now if we need to. So we turned on the audio, and what do you know? Like, at first I wasn't totally paying attention. I was fiddling with something. And I hear Elmo say, hi, Michelle. Hi, Yoshi. Hi, Marielos. Thanks for working on this app. It's been so much fun working with you. And my team went crazy. We're like, whoa, this works on us too. It's like that surprise and delight was something that got our team just really energized and turned what was just an ordinary meeting into a really great, fresh experience that we just it strengthened our relationship with Sesame and how much we love working with them. So in terms of that surprise and delight and how it works with an app, we've also used it in other situations, mostly to keep the material fresh. And one way to do it, like, you can't always just create a ton of content. That gets really difficult after a while. But if you can pull content from the user themselves or from a community, that of course helps. And this is an app that we did. It's called Prime, and we did it with the University of California, San Francisco. And it's geared towards people who have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And schizophrenia, a lot of people try to treat it with drugs, and that can deal with certain symptoms. But there are other symptoms that you can't treat with drugs. And those are symptoms such as depression and a lack of motivation. And typically, the way you deal with that is that you go to an appointment with a therapist, and that happens maybe once every 2 weeks. And usually by the time you show up, whatever crisis you had is long forgotten. It's too far between. So this app was meant to be a way to engage with people who had schizophrenia on a regular basis. And when we designed it, a couple things we kept in mind was we didn't want this to be very clinical. We wanted to make sure that it felt like something you could use without feeling stigmatized. So a couple things you see here is that first off, here's basically a feed where you can either look at your own tab or you can look at a tab of the people in your community. And in it, those with schizophrenia were asked to take pictures of moments that make them happy, because it's easy to forget those and fall into those moments of depression. But if you have an album ready for you that reminds you of times you were happy, then that helps. If you see the people around you who also have been similarly diagnosed with schizophrenia, just having happy moments as well, that also gets you to go out and have happy moments. And this is a feed that continuously changes, so it makes you want to come back and keep looking at it. It also has a community where you can access a whole community of peers or a community of counselors, and you can choose which counselor you want, and they're all very personable. I think at the very beginning, the counselors were given a script. They wrote very generic things about their credentials and who they were. And what we found was that that's not what people wanted to engage with. So they went back, and the counselors wrote much more personal accounts of who they were and really reached out more as friends. But the idea of this is now that people can get real-time feedback. It's not about remembering what happened to you and why you were upset or why you had some issue, and then coming up with that 2 weeks later when it's long past. Now when you have something come up, like you're in a restaurant and you look up and there's someone there and you can't tell if you should feel threatened or not, rather than cowering or leaving, a lot of the people using this would then pick up the app and be able to tap on a counselor or a friend and say, hey, I'm having these feelings right now, what should I do? And they get help right in the moment. But it's real time, it's right when you need it, and it's got the element of continuous change. And then probably the element that's most about surprise and how the app can bring up something new every day are these daily challenges. And these daily challenges are tailored to what your interests are and what symptoms you're specifically having. So in this one, it says, shoot hoops for 30 minutes. So this person might have written in their initial questionnaire that they really like basketball or sports, and perhaps they have trouble going outside. And so this will give them this challenge, and then if they complete it, every day they'll get a new challenge, something that maybe extends the amount of time or gets them to go out and do a different sport, so that gradually it becomes the norm to do these things. So these are some different ways that play can engage, some examples from toys, as well as some that span across other industries. And hopefully they show a good example of how play can engage through really stimulating prompts, as well as empowering the users, providing progress and reward, and also providing elements of surprise. And now that you've seen it and how it can not only manifest itself in toys, but also in the worlds of finance, education, energy use, and health, what will you do with the power of play? Thank you.